Yeah, there's some people having trouble with the links, so I'm gonna try to get them in.
Yeah, I apologize sincerely. I don't know why that link didn't work, but I have created a new one and I did do the blast. So I'm trying to make sure everybody who wants to get in is able. So Emily, I'm admitting.
Brad Holden just tried to, or he gets it.
And for the folks who are just joining in, very, very sorry about that link problem. We are monitoring to see any messages from folks who are trying to get in and aren't able to.
Yeah, I forwarded it to a couple of people that I think wanted to be here today.
Yeah, if we can give it a couple more minutes. I have 9:03.
Yeah.
Are you able? Okay, I don't know how you are feeling, Peter, as chair. Well, we do have a quorum. We are going to continue to add people as they come in. But if you would like to take care of some of the preliminary things, we could conceivably do that.
Sure. Yeah, I would like to start the meeting Thursday, March 23rd, 2023, Lamoille Basin Water Quality Council. I believe it is what now, 9:05. And I think we have some new faces today, perhaps, or we haven't seen in a while. So I think it would be probably good to make a round of introductions. And so I'll start off. So I'm Peter Danforth. I'm the chair of the Lamoille Basin Water Quality Council. And I will just send it to the person I see next, Kent.
Hi, Kent Henderson with Friends of Northern Lake Champlain with a voting chair or voting seat.
So maybe I can work through the list if that would help, Peter.
Yeah.
Jed, if you would like to introduce yourself. Oh, the names are going to keep jumping around, but maybe some way to approach this is if you are new, if you haven't been here before, you could introduce yourself and just jump in. Don't be shy, and that way we can maybe expedite things if that's okay with you, Peter.
Yep. Sorry, I was on mute. I was just going to call out people as I saw them, but
I'll go first. I'm Ron Rajensky, Hyde Park Town Administrator, checking things out, and we have a bunch of Lamoille River frontage in town.
I'm Jed Pfeffer. I'm from the Stewards of the Greensboro Watersheds, and I'm a voting member.
I'm Casey Spencer. I'm the new district manager for the Winooski Natural Resources Conservation District.
Allison Spazek, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain project coordinator.
I'm Emily Finnegan. I'm the district manager for the Caledonia County Natural Resources Conservation District, and I'm an alternate.
I'm Richard Goff. I'm a member of the Lamoille County Planning Commission Board of Directors. I'm a voting member.
Lauren Weston, district manager for the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District, and a voting member. He, she, her pronouns.
Brad, do you want to?
Else is new and sees himself as needing introduction, then would that be sufficient, Mr. Chairman?
I think there's a few more here. Brad, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Brad Holden, Town Administrator, Town of Underhill, and I'm representing the Chittenden Regional Planning Commission.
And I see.
My name is Sai Sarapalli, Senior Transportation Planning Engineer from Chittenden County Regional Planning Commission. I'm an alternate.
Megan?
Yep, Megan Rodier with Lamoille County Planning Commission, regional planner here, and I'm an alternate for Richard Goff.
Brandon, did you introduce yourself?
I'm Brandon Martin with Stone Environmental. Here to support Friends of Northern Lake Champlain. I apologize, I'm driving at the moment. I will be with you on a computer shortly.
Can't tell. Allison, did you introduce yourself?
Yes.
Okay.
Bruce Wheeler of the local planning commission.
Can you hear me? With staff?
And Dean Pierce, you're not so able staff today.
It's okay, Dean. Right. So thank you for everyone introducing each other to each other. We shall move on to, I guess I'll review the meeting protocol. So meeting protocols with the Lamoille 7 Blisk. You know, as possible, book members should have their Zoom name and title and name of your organization. You can have voting or alternate if possible, and pronouns if desired. The book members are expected to have cameras turned on during the entirety of the meeting unless it's technically not possible for you. And then we want members to, you know, be expected to stay focused, avoid multitasking, and follow the general guidance. If you wouldn't do something in an in-person meeting, don't do it at the virtual meeting. Use the raise hand function to indicate a request to speak, and then come off mute. This is an effort to make sure we're all heard in turn. All members should stay muted unless called upon if needed. And if needed, the quiz staff may mute participants to avoid background noise. And any comments made in the chat will be read aloud at the appropriate time by quiz staff in full for the public record. I believe that's the entirety of our Zoom norms, unless I missed something. Okay. So let's move on to the agenda. First off, are there any comments that want to be made at this point regarding the agenda for today? Okay, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve.
Okay, thank you, Jed. Do I hear a second?
This is Kent. I second.
Okay, Kent would second that motion. All in favor of approving the minutes today, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, hearing none, the ayes have it. Okay, on to the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from last meeting? Okay. And any comments, further comments or additions? Or edits? Okay, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve last meeting's minutes?
Mr. Chairman, there is one point to make, and that is that the wrong date is listed at the top.
Oh, okay.
We will correct that.
You will correct that? Okay, thank you. Okay, with that being noted, and that changes would be made by the QUISP, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
This is Lauren. I so move.
All right, Lauren so moves. And do I hear a second?
I second it.
Okay, that was Jed. Okay, thank
Yes.
you, Jed, seconding that motion to approve the minutes. All right, all in favor of approving last meeting's minutes with that additional change being made, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, any abstentions? Hearing none, the ayes have it. The motion has been, or I mean, the minutes have been approved from our last meeting. And we'll go on, I think, to public comment. Okay, is there anyone here from the public who would like to add any additional information or have any comments to make before we get into the bulk of the meeting? Okay, so does it sound like there is? So we'll move on to the seating of any new reps or alternates as needed.
I don't believe that's. I don't believe
Going
that's the
back and
case.
forth. That's not it. Sorry, I have to exit full screen so I can see the agenda.
Oh, sorry, yeah, I don't believe there are any seatings that are necessary at this time.
Okay, I just know there was some back and forth there in regards to that. All right.
Yeah, I haven't heard anything to solidify it, so.
Okay, great. I guess we'll move on then to the voting process. Item 7. Dean, do you want to talk to that? Speak to that?
I'm sorry. Voting process.
Yes.
We're ready. So this is going to be a challenging meeting because of the amount of material that we're trying to cover and because things are new for so many of us. The main objective of the meeting is to address a prioritized list of projects. But before that's done, we felt that it was important to have some preliminary discussions. And one of the preliminary discussions that we need to have concerns the voting process. I have included in the packets some text from the rule. There's also some text from draft guidance that I did not include, but I'll mention in just a minute. But as it was mentioned in the packet, or as it's shown in the packet, the role of the council is to vote on a prioritized list that's prepared by the QUISP. And it's also made very clear that there are really 2 lists, or at least 2 lists. There's a list for projects that are assessment or evaluation projects early in the game. And then there is a list that has to do with projects that are for seeking funds for design or for implementation. So we know at this point that we will be presenting to you at least 2 lists. It's possible in the future those lists will be configured differently, or we might have more lists. But I just wanted it understood that the presentation of these 2 lists is flowing from rule. There are some more technical issues having to do with voting that stem from the fact that the rule says if an applicant organization must recuse themselves from a vote that involves their project, their application. What's not explicit in rule is whether the votes take place individually or on a slate, and there's text that suggests each approach. In today, at least, because there's only one project in the assessment and evaluation category, it's going to be pretty simple. We have one application, so there's really no distinction between voting on an individual project and voting on it as a group, and there's really only one that would need to recuse, and they're not a voting member anyway, so there's no problem. But when the time comes for the group to consider the design and implementation projects, one question will be, how will the group vote? There is some preliminary guidance from the Department of Environmental Conservation that says that if your organization has an application in for this round of funding, that you should recuse yourself from all of the votes. That's what is in black and white in some preliminary guidance, but there's been some verbal guidance that says, well, if there's enough money to go around and you aren't in a position basically where you could vote no against a competing organization, you would be able to vote. So long story short is that because the amount of money that is available for projects is greater than the amount of money that's requested, we don't think that there's going to be a problem with organizations voting on things other than their own projects. So when the time comes, it will really be a question of, does the group as a whole feel like it wants to vote on everyone, in which case everyone who has an application in will need to recuse because their application is part of the discussion. Or if we vote on them individually, if the council votes on them individually, we will tank them in order and you will only recuse yourself, or at least our advice is that you would only recuse yourself if you are the applicant. So hopefully there are If that's sufficiently clear, but it just seemed like it was worth mentioning some of this in advance of the voting so that we don't have to address it then. So we would like people to use motions when it's clear that a decision is ready to be made. We haven't drafted those for you, but we can offer wording at the time. I apologize that that wasn't more coherent, but if there are questions about voting, I would answer them. And Peter, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, so as chair, I'm just wondering, you know, as my powers as chair, if that affects in any way the voting or the motion process. If I have two, say, projects that are on this list, am I still acting as chair in regards to asking for motions to be made and to basically state the ayes have it and et cetera, right? When it comes to my own projects or to other people's projects for that matter. I just want to be clear about what my role is, or if I need to hand it over to the alternate Emily, you know, to take that role throughout the process.
Well, if the chair is not able to do something, it would normally fall to the vice chair.
Or vice chair, I mean, sorry, vice chair. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, so it would go to Sarah if
Sarah,
she's
yeah.
here. But your question is a good one, is that even if you're not voting, would you be, would it be allowed for you to essentially orchestrate the vote? And my own initial take on it is that it would be okay, but you might want to just poll the members to see if anyone is uncomfortable with you continuing to be essentially conducting the orchestra while the vote takes place, because you would not be voting.
Right. And I wouldn't be making any comments. I would just be asking for motions and for votes, you know, so I believe I'm neutral in that regard. It's that responsibility, but maybe other people may disagree, and I will gladly let the reins go and let, you know, or is there other people who know of other boards that work in a certain way? There's questions. So Megan, I think your hand came up first.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, Peter, you're just facilitating, basically, is how I see it. You know, you're continuing to facilitate as chair. You're not voting on anything, you know, in particular when your projects come up. So I don't see it being an issue. It's just a chair facilitating as, you know, you usually would. So.
Yeah, thanks. I thought that too, but I just want to be clear and I want to make sure people are not uncomfortable. Ken?
Yeah, the one thing you may have to consider is keeping track of a quorum if people are recusing themselves from voting on a project.
Yes.
That actually might be a good thing to consider right now, Dean. I think we do have a quorum no matter what in regards to the attendance today.
Yeah, we're prepared with this spreadsheet to make it a little bit simpler. So we have the ability to track and basically block out those who must recuse. So we're ready, we think, for handling that with this spreadsheet. So we will be tracking that, Ken, and we think we're ready for it.
It's a good point, though, for sure, Ken. Ken?
I'm not a voting member, but I'm not fond of the of voting on a slate of contracts. I think individually would be my preference.
Yes, Mr. Chair, if I can just
yes, please
take the floor and take that as a launching off point. So it'll be something that the body will determine when you get there. I did gloss over some things that were in the packet, and that is the group will need to decide if things will happen as separate votes. And so if someone launches right into that, then it would follow. And then something else I didn't mention is this idea of the cost effectiveness And I'm going to say a few more words about cost effectiveness. And then also something that is an area where the council may wish to discuss things is co-benefits. And the material that was submitted as part of applications on co-benefits is rather limited. And it was understood that if co-benefits are going to be a factor in deciding whether or not something gets admitted, then the sponsor of the application can talk to the group more about co-benefits. So I wanted to make it clear that the body will have an opportunity to talk about co-benefits should it be seen as important, and if it helps determine whether or not something gets funded or not, because we have a bubble, that we have a line that we can't fund. Now, as I said before, we have, in theory, the funding available to cover all of the projects. However, and this is the next step in the presentation that I was going to make, just because they can be funded doesn't mean they should be funded when cost effectiveness is considered. So I've got a bullet in the material that went out is, do any projects fly in the face of reasonable cost effectiveness? And that's the topic I'm going to address next. Something that the QUISP has been thinking about since the beginning is this idea of cost effectiveness, because the mandate of the QUISP is to pursue and fund projects that will help us meet the phosphorus reduction target, and to do it in a cost-effective manner. So we have to consider it. The way that DEC views the cost effectiveness is a fairly obvious way. It's the kilograms of phosphorus. What is the cost of reducing a kilogram of phosphorus for a project? And we can compare those numbers. Now, that cost, kilograms per dollar, so to speak, is contingent on us having estimates of phosphorus and of the cost of the project. We know that the cost data that we have for projects isn't always great. So it's something that we will have to contend with, cost estimates that are imperfect. Another thing that we have to contend with is that we are told by DEC that the estimate of phosphorus reduction is to be based on their phosphorus calculator. So they have done work to develop calculators that in theory will tell us how much phosphorus a project will reduce. So we're told to use those phosphorus estimates and those tools along with the cost that we have, and both are imperfect. And so we just have to deal with that, the reality that it's imperfect. And I do see your hand, Jed, and I'll get to you in just 1 second. It's just that we can talk a little bit about some kind of objective thresholds, or we might be able to talk about objective thresholds in time, but it's going to be tough to do initially because of the imperfect information that we have. So I'm going to switch slides, but before I do, maybe Jed, I'll take your question.
Yeah, yeah, I have two actually. One, Ken mentioned the slate versus the individual voting model. So I had a question about, well, could you illustrate a slate? And then the second question is, when they make an estimate of the phosphorus reduction, I mean, what's it based on? Is it based on prior projects that were similar in scope? I mean, so how do they come up with these?
Yeah. So to take your second question first, yes, the calculator is really several calculators for different types of projects, and it is based on empirical evidence. How do projects of a certain type perform? And so there are formulas essentially that get developed that help predict phosphorus reduction based on, let's say, the size of a stormwater pond and how large the watershed that flows into that pond, and so on. So it's not one calculator that treats all projects as though they're the same. It's several different types of calculators that are specific to that project type. Hope
Thank
that
you.
helps.
Yes.
So in terms of slate, a slate is just the word that I'm using that would say that if we had only 3 projects, or if we had 10 projects and we had a lot of money and they were all amazingly good projects, slate would simply be that someone moves to approve all of them in one fell swoop. That's just what we're referring to. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
So-
I would sort of be along with Ken, especially in the process where we're just beginning the voting process. It would seem the analysis and discussion, I think, would be better to deal with individual projects. That's my bias.
All right, so thanks. As far as the next step, I wanted to drill down a little bit into this idea of thresholds and where do thresholds, or where might thresholds come from? And so I'm hoping that everybody can see on the screen this particular slide or this table that is one way of looking at things. And I have data for 3 different basins that some of you are familiar with, to just make it possible to see how basins compare. So in Basin 7, the target is about 40 kilograms, and the amount of money that DEC provided for the basin is about $550,000. And the reason that they provided that amount is because they did work attempting to determine how much it would cost to provide 40 kilograms of phosphorus reduction. And so if their estimates are in the ballpark, then we can calculate an average, and we can say that, oh, okay, it should cost on average about $14,000 per kilogram in our basin. That's one idea of a threshold or a benchmark that can help with decision making. And it isn't something that is hard and fast. It's not something that we as a QUISP are saying, oh, if it's cost more than this, we recommend against funding it. We're not saying that, but I will say something along those lines in just a minute or two. I just wanted to highlight a couple of other things. I do see Megan's hand is up. And Jed, maybe your hand can come down just so that doesn't confuse me. Because there are some assumptions in how DEC calculated the problems in different basins. This is why the amounts are somewhat different, because I can get into the weeds if there are questions, but there are differences in the amount of funding, and whether or not that's going to affect us in the long run, we'll see. But Megan, what's your question?
Yeah, so I'm just looking at these figures. That 548,000, can you remind me, was that just for this fiscal year? When we get into the next round, are we starting with additional funds? Because our request that we have in front of us is going to take up most of that.
Yeah, so that is an annual number, and it is a number that in theory not in theory, it should be backfilled with a new allocation starting July 1.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
And also important to note is that the money this is not a spend it or lose it situation. So money will carry over. That's something that's important as well. Peter.
Yeah, one thing I've noticed, and also working with the other basin, is these average costs per kilogram averages. If you look, do you have the table that shows all the different things like stormwater, forest, et cetera? Right. So if you look at developed and you see how skewed that is. So you have stormwater best measure practices, you have 46,000, which is skewed from the average big time, right? And we're going to run into that a lot when projects like developed stormwater projects get brought up. And I think people should probably understand that too. As you said, it's not all written in stone, and understand just how varied the variance on these numbers are when it came up with the average. So if they see something that is a stormwater best measure practice, that's like, oh my God, that's way above, you have to understand too, that that's pretty much the going rates these days for developed stormwater infiltration practices. And just wanted to bring that up, sort of front load people with that understanding, so that they don't just look at these numbers in very rigid terms.
Yes, and this slide is in the packet for that very reason. It's to help people understand that different types of projects are in sort of different categories of cost, and the developed land type projects do in general cost more per kilogram, but they may have other advantages. And I was deliberate in including this table because I didn't want people to think that the only reference was these numbers, that it's important to recognize. Now, as we will get into the costs and the performance of the applicants, having this understanding may help us. It might not help us to the point where we would like them to help us. But anyway, this is the reason why this slide is in there, is because different categories of projects have different average costs. And this is one set of numbers in time. It's likely that these numbers will be replaced with numbers that are substantially higher because these numbers are a few years old. So if I can move on, the thing I wanted to say about how the QUISP is viewing this is we understand DEC says, you don't have to apply a strict cost effectiveness threshold or number to these initial rounds. And that's valuable because projects are coming in high and the cost information is imperfect. However, we feel like as a QUISP that if projects are costing 2 or 3 times those reference costs, then we're giving pause. We are hesitant, and that will become a little bit clearer as I get further into my presentation here. But that would mean that for certain types of projects, it might be okay that something is $20,000 a kilogram or $25,000 a kilogram, because that's roughly 2 times or a little bit more the cost. We're okay with that. But if something is 5 times the cost, we're questioning that cost effectiveness, and we would think that the BWQC might too also. So that's basically the last thing I wanted to say before I get to the lists. Were there any questions? I see Ken's raising a hand, but I don't know if that was just okay. Ken, it looked like your hand was waved, but it doesn't.
Oh, sorry, no.
Okay, so if I can just barrel ahead as far as the project list, I wanted to do a little bit more stage setting. I'm zeroing in, I'm moving aside basin 5, but I would have it for basin 6 and 7, since I'm also going to be talking with basin 6 later today. This makes clear that these dollar amounts are for this fiscal year. There's I hesitate to call it a rule of thumb, but there's an initial indication of how much of that annual amount might go to ID and assessment projects. It's 7%. You can see the dollar amounts that have been requested in that category, and we feel like we did prioritize the assessment projects. And because we may not get another round of assessment applications processed by the end of this fiscal year, we're comfortable suggesting that all of the assessment projects be approved, and we can talk more about that. You can see that that would leave smaller amounts for design and implementation. And you can see that the amounts requested again are below, but they do use a good chunk of the total. Now, keep in mind, this is looking at the total costs of a project, because we are looking down the road at what the true costs will be. But anyway, this is just intended to set the stage to see where the dollars would divide if we were spending everything now. Now I realize this is small text. You may not have had a chance to look at this in detail, but I just wanted to give a high level view, and that is that these slides have the text that was provided as part of the project description in the application. And so we have one project that is in the assessment identification project. It was submitted by the town of Jericho. It's got a project number 11322, and it's looking at an area in Jericho. I'll pull up a map in just a second. It's essentially it's an attempt to come up with a conceptual design in a village area. The area has been studied before, but that study was suggesting some pretty costly type improvements that people aren't really sure would be supported. And so this is taking another look at the problem in this area. My intention is to just give some basic intros, and people who are from the applicants are not required to attend these meetings, and I'm not sure if Linda is here. She prepared the application, but I just wanted to make that point again, because it's something that was in one of the emails, that they were not required to attend. The projects I will just go through quickly. There are two from the Lamoille County Conservation District. One is what's known as a strategic woody addition project that's in Elmore on a large parcel there. The other Lamoille County project is a village stormwater type project in Hyde Park that's near the post office. Fairfax submitted an application for a developed land stormwater system near BFA Fairfax High School. The Friends of Northern Lake Champlain submitted an application for a project that has some different multiple components that is in Georgia at the intersection of Route 7 and Route 104. I'm just going to pop through the maps just so people know what. Okay, Megan, before I hit the maps, maybe I'll just answer your question.
Yeah, can you remind me, did we set like a limit on how many applications one organization can submit, like per round?
No.
Okay, so there is no actual limit on that, so there can be multiple applications per round per organization.
That's how things were set up this first round. Whether that would ever change, it remains to be seen. But yes, multiple applications are.
Yeah, it seems like more flexibility is a good thing given the amount of projects that we're trying to pursue here. So
I'm just going to quickly show, because I want people to have some idea of what we're talking about and where we're talking about. This is a map that was provided with the application showing the project location for the Jericho project. You would reach it by Brown's Trace Road if you were traveling on Route 1, if you were traveling on Route 15. My intention, again, to give very high level overviews. This is a map for the strategic woody addition project in Elmore. This red is showing the watershed. This black is showing the parcel in question. You can see the streams that are highlighted in blue as part of that project. And the blue area, the blue streams would be the streams that are restored. The Deer Brook Gully project, as I said, it's in Georgia, near the, or at the intersection of 104 and Route 7. It's a multi-component project. And again, this is just to have people some concept before individual applicants address things further if required. This is showing the area that drains into portion of the BFA Fairfax property, and the project would be located, I believe, right in this area underground. And here is a map showing the Church Street Post Office High Park. And we can refer back, but intention here is to just give some idea of what these projects are. And people can ask questions about them, and hopefully applicants can answer them, or I can answer them. So any questions before I move to this next step, Lauren?
Yeah, Dean, I was just wondering if maybe for next time we can get like the full applications in advance. I think that would just like be helpful.
Yes, so two things to say in response to that. Yes, I had a conversation with someone about this yesterday, day before. And so yes, the information, we want to be transparent about this. You're going to see a dashboard that has all of the information. I'll send the link out. But although we want to be transparent, we also want to make sure that the emphasis is on those things that the prioritization model considers. So it's really a we didn't want to ask for a whole lot of information that wasn't used in the prioritization of projects, but sometimes we did get it. There are things like letters of support that are not part of the calculation and so on. But in just a minute, you're going to see what we hope to be able to do in future rounds, where you'll just click a link and you'll be able to see all of the applications and all of the attachments and things like that just by clicking the link. We had hoped to have that in a point where we could send that link out once the deadline was reached, but we weren't able to do that. And as far as the work of this particular committee, it was really just a question of, how realistic would it be to give all of the materials to people a week in advance and expect them they could get all through it. But yes, we live and learn. I'm not sure if it was Richard or Jed who is next.
I think Richard had his hand up first.
So, the list of the 4 projects puts the cost in kilograms per $10,000, and the chart we have for the Basin 7 is $13,000+ per kilogram. And I want to know if I did my arithmetic correctly. Does that work out to 0.727 kilograms per $10,000?
So I'm not sure if I heard everything that you said or if I followed it, but if I'm anticipating where you're going, is that the phosphorus performance of the projects that we have is not great, except with one exception. And so, yeah, I don't have the exact numbers that you gave me, but if you wanted to refer to a particular slide, I could maybe keep up with you.
Well, the slide that says more things to consider.
Okay.
And it lists the 3 basins. There you go.
Yes. Okay.
And Basin 7 is $13,739 per kilogram. So the other chart talks about kilograms per $10,000. So I tried to do the inverse of that, and I just want to know if I did it correctly. And I came up with 0.727 kilograms per $10,000.
Yeah, and the reason why that I appreciate that it's not the same metric. And apologies for that. We'll line things up better next time. But one of the reasons why things were expressed at per $10,000 is because the performance of some of the projects is so low and there were so many decimal points. It was like, it's difficult for people to appreciate the numbers unless they're expressed in fewer decimal points. So we did that to reduce the number of decimal points. But I have another slide that might, or I have other information that might give you a better answer to your question that tells you what some of these costs are. Okay. So Jed?
Yeah, I just wanted to know how many applications there were prior to this prioritization by your office.
So all of them. So there are no applications that have been screened out.
Okay.
So every application that that we are seeing today was every application that was submitted is before you today.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
So so maybe I want to do something here. Hold on just a sec. Just one more minute.
I just want to point out that Dia had made a comment, I think, in response to Dick's question. I think the data point you are looking for should be accessible on page 16 in the packet, what she said.
Okay, so I wanted to do something which is to be sure that people understood that we want people to see the calculations. So what I'm hoping everyone can see on their screen is the prioritization calculator that you have seen before, where when people filled out their applications using the form, it was saved into a file in Smartsheet, which is our data platform. Our hope is in the next round to be able to do everything in Smartsheet, but it's going to require us to push applicants a little bit more or ask for information in a little bit different way. But anyway, the Excel file that you see today is we pulled the data out from the projects. We have their ID number, their type, and we have their phosphorus benefits as provided in the application. And the cost information is provided in the application with some caveats. And the caveat are that we wanted people to give us their best estimate of their cost. But sometimes the best you can do is a range. However, for the purposes of calculating, we can't deal with a range. We have to deal with a number. And so we took the midpoint of the range, for good or ill. That's how we got around this obstacle of having only approximate costs. we have a range, we took the midpoint of the range. So when we have total cost of the project for applications, this number is a midpoint of a range when a range was provided. And when we do the next round, we're gonna have to figure out whether there's a way for applicants to give us an individual number. And ideally, it would have been, we were gonna tell people in advance that we're using the midpoint of the range, but because we had to produce a ranking for this meeting, that's the decision that we made to allow the calculations to go forward. We have the design life information that was provided. There is questions sometimes with how long, what is the life of the project? I will remind people that we can't deal with perpetuity for projects that are deemed perpetual with an infinite number. In legal's terms, perpetuity is sometimes treated as 99, but for phosphorus projects, DEC is looking at the phosphorus benefits only within 15 years. We looked at things within 40. So anyway, this is this adjusted design life that we use. So we have the actual years, and then we have this adjusted, which basically says if a project is perpetual, the number comes down to 40. That only comes into play in a limited way. Also, people were asked to provide estimates of maintenance costs. This is another area where the numbers are very soft. People would give text responses, and so we had to do the best we could. And in some cases where no costs were included, it's not really possible to say there are not going to be any maintenance costs. So there were numbers like in this particular case, 250 was put in as just a placeholder rather than 0, because there will need to be, as part of all projects funded by the QISP, there needs to be verification that maintenance is taking place, and there needs to be inspection. And so a $250 figure was put in the case where someone says, well, there's no, I don't know, there won't be a cost. We put in just as a placeholder. And so that gives us this ability to look at the estimated cost of maintenance on a kilogram basis. And then conformance with the basin plan was a part of the scoring, which really was entirely left to the applicant, and the number of co-benefits, which is another area where we didn't question the applicant's assessment of how many co-benefits they had. So those are the numbers that were put in. The scoring is as we had discussed at previous meetings, and the total scores get added up, and then the ranking gets determined based on the total scores. I'm gonna ask that we, the main point that we get from this explanation is that we're happy to keep the calculations explicit. And the objective of the QISP was to come up with a rank. The rank, in our view, is more important than the actual scores, because there are funny things that can cause differences in the scores. And also what is important in our mind is this idea of cost effectiveness. And there could be a project, and there is a project that scores relatively high, but its cost effectiveness is relatively low. And that's because this prioritization model is not perfect. And what we really have is a single project that is better than a cluster of projects. And so the difference between those projects that are below 2, 3, and 4 is relatively small. And different responses on the part of the applicant might have changed the order, or the weights would have changed the order. But anyway, Richard.
The chart you're showing us is the model that we discussed last meeting, where this is the one that basically you people came up with that is different from the DEC model. Is that correct?
Yes, and I will say this, that we hadn't intended to put the applications into the DEC model, but I did. And the thing that I would say about how some of these projects fare in the DEC model, I don't have the file open, but I can, is that I didn't think or didn't know that it was possible, but some of the projects actually get negative numbers in the DEC model.
That was my question. What would it look like in the DEC model? So not very good is what your answer is.
They did not look good, is the answer. So I'm going to pivot just a little bit, if I may, and go back to I'm hoping people can see what I'm hoping to do with the next few minutes is to get us thinking back about the projects in a higher level, and then the ranking that we gave them, what they will cost for this initial stage and what the total cost would be, and what the quiz position is regarding those. And then there can be questions asked either of me or of anybody attached to the project. But as I said before, ID and assessment, only one in that category. It's a good project, we think, and the funds are certainly there for the work to be done. And just keep in mind, it's $22,000 now. It's too early to be able to say what the phosphorus benefits of a project like that would be, so it doesn't come into play. Richard again.
So I'm trying to understand, are we voting to approve projects, or are we voting to accept the ranking that's been given?
Well, no project is going to get funding unless the council says you believe it should get funding. So fundamentally, the decision that's being made is, should the project get funds? And that will happen in an organized way. And when one is approved, it's one, and when two are approved, there are two. So it's okaying the project, and it's just this phase of the project, but with an eye towards the future. But we're only committing the funds for this phase. You would be committing. So you're saying whether or not you think it should get funds.
And so what would the motion be?
Well, someone could make the motion to approve application X for its funding request, something to that effect.
Okay. Should we do that right now? I would move that for this project.
I don't want to interrupt a possible second, but it could happen, but there are a couple more hands.
Okay, so Richard, are you making a motion to approve this project?
What I was trying to do is understand the wording, and I think I do. And yeah, I wanted to get this move that this project funding be approved. I think that's the right words. Just so we can have a discussion and move on to something.
All right, so I hear that you made a motion to approve this project. Do I have a second?
I have something to say before maybe a second should be made.
Okay, okay, let me rephrase. And I wish I'd said this, but I think we need to hear some more commentary first before moving on to the motions. Yes, Lauren.
Are the number of zeros correct? Because that is $225,000.
That's the estimate of what an eventual project would cost.
Okay, so we don't have what this project is asking for on this slide.
Oh, there he is. What the project is asking for is $22,158. So it's the project cost proposed phase. That's the amount that's being requested. Sorry.
Gotcha. Sorry. The lack of, I was thinking that number was the project ID number. Sorry. I'm like, can you add commas next time?
I think Brad is next.
Yes.
I was actually the person who called Dean yesterday regarding the applications themselves, and And I just feel, I think I'm starting to catch on a little bit here, a little bit more, that it's really the Lamoille Basin Clean Water Service Provider that's vetting these applications and making recommendations. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonably good
Right,
way of
that's
putting it.
That's the gist of it. So I would say just a suggestion and a possible motion. I'm not moving to do so, but maybe a proper motion would be to accept the application for the proposed phase based upon Lamoille Basin Water Service Provider review of the application. Because basically we're not, as far as I see it here, you know, I know a little bit about the project. I've seen it here, but we're just basically we're just basically confirming what the QUISP has done, correct? So there's no real review here as far as this board is concerned.
So the confines for this are the system created by the law and the rule, and the rule says what I had shown before, and that's we prepare, the QUISP prepares a prioritization, and the WIC shall consider the preliminary scoring and ranking and make any adjustments to the co-benefits as needed, then shall vote to advance clean water projects of those two different types. So it's the motion would be to advance that project, which I'm interpreting as you would say it can get the funding, because as I've said, we can't, as a QUISP, have that procurement without the BWQC saying those funds can go to that project. But as far as I mean, I get it is an unusual situation in that it is this way and it's spelled out this way, and the role of the BWQC is to talk about it, and the area that's clearest where that you have, you know, changes have to do with co-benefits. But I also think a very important contribution of the BWQC is this idea of how, you know, how far would you go to fund a project that has relatively low phosphorus performance? That's an important area for the council to weigh in.
Sure. My only point is, I think in the motion should be that it's based upon the QUISP's analysis and review.
Jed?
So just in reading it, it seems like, I mean, I'm just trying to understand the basic purpose or goal of the project, which seems to be to come up with, you know, distill the best management processes for, you know, getting rid of stormwater that comes off of impermeable surfaces. I mean, is that a fair way of looking at it, or is it broader than that?
So evaluation projects, this particular project is emphasizing the community engagement and getting more people in the community involved in the process than happened the earlier time, when the solution that was recommended is one that people living and working in the town today think isn't appropriate, and that would be too costly and essentially might never get done. And so the emphasis of this reexamination, as I am understanding it, because I did talk with Linda, is that it's what this funding is paying for as a consultant to look at the area around this town green and look at opportunities to manage stormwater. But in addition to this kind of basic approach, there's time and money that's included that would be there to help get more people involved in the decision-making process, so that there's buy-in for the project and that there's a better match between what's recommended as the outcome of this than there was the last time. Does that help?
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, Peter, you're the chair.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to be polite. But I just want to make sure I was worried about something looking at this page. And then can you just show the other projects real quick? I wanted to see the columns. Okay. So because that one was an assessment, it linked just the cost of that particular ID assessment and didn't include the total project costs until later. So I just want to verify that because I'm looking at, oh, so the total costs for preliminary designs are obviously not going to be that high. Okay, I understand now. Just wanted to be clear. And then to Brad's point, so Brad, I think that you're correct in saying that this is based on the quiz evaluation, but it also requires, the vote of the BWQC. So in some sense, we are also evaluating these results. So I don't know if I can, based upon WISP analysis and WISC review, I would say I would add that to the language of the motion as well.
I guess that's all I'm trying to say is,
Yeah.
We're presented with very limited information.
Right.
And I know the QUISP did an excellent job. They know much more about this than I do.
Right.
But it's just important to say anything when you certify to anything or you vote on anything, what you're basing your decision on.
And if I may slip in there ahead just to respond to that, the slide that is on the screen now, the basis for ranking, I can appreciate people, feeling like, okay, we don't know a lot about this project, but in simple terms, what matters for the ranking or the scoring is what is in this table. Frankly, nothing else matters other than the scoring. And the scoring is, as you see here, it's a project that's it gets the maximum number of points. I don't have the maximums here, but it gets the maximum of points for the different questions that were asked in the application. And I can understand people might question, well, was the applicant justified for providing their number? But in this initial round, as a quiz, we are very much limiting as much as we can, like second guessing an applicant's reason for their response. It's like it would be kind of I think harsh for us to say your consultant who calculated the cost of the project might have calculated it wrong. We aren't asking that. We're not questioning it. We might have been in touch with them, because I was, to say, we just want to make sure that the number that we have is correct and that there are no typos, because that number will affect how the scoring works. So we are taking at face value almost entirely the scoring that the applicant submitted, or the numbers that the applicant submitted. But when it comes to the basis for the ranking of this project, there's a maximum number of 32 points, and they got 32 points.
Megan?
I'm just thinking like for future rounds and how these tables are presented. I'm wondering, I mean, I guess it'd be better to just have like a clear request instead of like the total, you're trying to show the total project cost as well over the life of the project or something. It's just, we don't really need to know that right now though, do we? I mean, really what we need to see is what is the applicant requesting now for funding for this particular phase. So yeah, maybe that could be clarified next time.
Well, from our point of view, it is important to know what the future holds, because if the group is making an investment in a project, it's going to mean the potential for commitment of other funds. So, whereas it might look like, oh, it's great that we can count on $550,000 year after year, but if when we spent $20,000 in a prior year, we are opening ourselves up to the possibility of another request in the future for 225,000. We need to do some accounting for that, because otherwise we could be shocked later when we haven't tracked it that, oh gosh, well, wait a second, we have all these projects that are coming back to us and they
Okay.
need money.
I see. So you're trying to track the overall, future requests that might stem from that project. Yeah, so maybe just the two categories be a little clearer, like this is what they're requesting for this round versus this is the estimate of what the total project costs might be, because we obviously don't really know that until we get a little further along in the design process. Okay, thanks, Dee.
I just want to make a note that Emily Finnegan had put a comment in saying in the future, it would be great if max points are on this table so we have some context. And then before Ken or Jed, I get to you, Aaron also put in, I beg to differ, Dean. I think the proposed project objectives, requested funds and total project costs, as well as the scoring the applicant has listed are what matters. So some more itemized. So that's some feedback there from Aaron. And then I just want to make sure that their comments were noted. So I guess Jed, you had your hand up next.
So can we go back to the scoring table there? So you have two different areas about cost effectiveness of reduction 1 and reduction 2. I don't really understand that, what the two areas are.
So I'm gonna have to do a refresh of my memory, but the application form asked a couple of different questions, and so this is just a ham-handed way of breaking out the fact that there were two questions that were asked that have to do with cost effectiveness. And the first one, or one of them, had to do with whether or not the project, as it goes forward, was going to explicitly consider, as part of the evaluation of the solutions to the project, in the evaluation of the solutions to the problem, will whoever is doing this project be asking themselves, oh, okay, not only do we have a solution to the problem, but is it a cost-effective solution? Because we are this whole new system, this new paradigm that we have, is saying we have to do all of this work to reduce phosphorus, but we also have to do it in a way that's cost-effective. It's not entirely clear that everybody who's working on these projects, and I'm not pointing the finger at anybody, it's everybody, it's all of us. The orientation hasn't always been, oh, when I'm trying to solve a problem, I need to be thinking about doing it in the most cost-effective way possible. So one of the questions that was asked of the people that submitted for this type of funding was, will your project, as it goes forward, ask that question? Because it's an important and tough question. And if someone says, yeah, as my project goes forward, we're going to make sure that the consultants are considering if it's a cost-effective solution. Because if there's a theoretical problem and there are 3 different solutions, and one is like really not cost-effective, it's good to be explicit about that, because we are trying to solve this phosphorus problem cost-effectively. So that's one of the questions. And then the other question was just how many different elements of the project are there? Could this result in? And that's the second one. So if someone is doing a study and they're looking as part of that study at 3 specific areas, and so there's the potential for 3 different projects that would come of it, that would get more points than one that's just looking at one area and would only get 1 project. It's very subjective because we don't know anything about those projects, but that's what those scores, or that's what those categories were about. It's asking those 2 different types of questions about cost effectiveness.
So just to be clear about it again, so the first question has to do with an overall sense of cost effectiveness, and the second breaks it into parts. I'm still not sure I have it right.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can, I think that's a reasonable way of putting it. It's
Okay. It's just a different way of getting at cost effectiveness.
well, so one is more perspective than the other. But like I say, I think that it's just enough to explain that an applicant gets more points when it comes to seeking funds for an assessment project when their project is one where they're going to contemplate how important it is to solve the problem in a cost-effective way. That's the message that I need to leave everybody with. That is part of that ranking.
Okay, and all of these scores are out of 10, is that right?
No, these are not out of 10. The total number of scores, the maximum scores in each of these, this particular applicant gave themselves the maximum score in response to all of the questions. And I can compare that to the other, I don't have those numbers here, but I could possibly later have you see what happened in the other basin, but the scores were a little bit lower. They were maybe like in the 24 to 28 range out of a maximum of 32.
Okay, then I guess I would second Emily's, her concern for making sure that we understand, what the maximum points value for each category is.
Yeah, and not to try to shut down discussion. One of the things that we're trying to do is to get the QUISP to focus. They got the BWQC to focus on the things that, at least from our perspective, are the things that really matter. Our mandate is to try to do projects and then for them to be cost effective. We know that we need to invest in early work so that we have more projects in the pipeline. Our position on this is we feel like our recommendation is to fund this project, and it doesn't, we don't want a situation where we end up having too much discussion about something that in the scheme of things is relatively minor. We're nowhere close to the 7% and so on, that the conversations need to be focusing on the bigger stones. This is a fairly small rock.
I think, Ken, you had your hand up next.
Yeah, just to comment on these assessment type projects. And I don't think you should be putting any weight in about what the project's going to cost until the assessment is complete, because that number is a total crapshoot. So I don't think we should be worrying about on the assessment level what the project costs. I don't think that should even be on the table at all.
And it's not as far as the scoring. It doesn't affect the score. It's only in that other table to have people understand what will perhaps result in the future. But the cost of the project is not, the eventual cost of the project is not used to score.
Okay.
All right. So I have a sort of, I guess, a point of order or question regarding votes and reviews of these projects. I know earlier there was a sort of almost a motion or a motion to approve this project, but did we want to, are we going to go by these one by one and do it like that? Or are we going to go through the slate of projects and look at them all before we make the votes? If we are going to today, Dean, what would you recommend?
Well, I think when we get the assessment, ID assessment projects out of the way, that yes, there will be a global look at the design implementation projects, and it's an overall picture before there's a vote on anything in particular.
Okay, so you separated those into batches like that. I get you. Thanks for clarifying. Okay, so, and based upon the conversations I've heard, I'll try to, I don't know if I can get the wording right. Do I hear a motion to approve the project in Jericho, the assessment based upon the quiz scoring model and the WISC review and feedback?
I motion to approve.
And that was Jed. I hear a motion from
Yes.
Jed to approve the Town of Jericho Stormwater Assessment ID project as listed here. Do I hear a second? Or do I hear? Do I hear?
I'll
Dick, I hear
second
a
that.
second from Richard Goff to approve this project based upon WISC scoring model and WISC feedback and review.
Point of order, can we just repeat what the motion is exactly? Because you gave a motion, Peter, that then Ken, I think.
I didn't
had a
give
different
motion.
Can we just clarify the motion?
Okay, so
Yeah.
Jed, you want to try to?
Sure.
Best.
I mean, I approve the motion to accept the particular project the Town of Jericho is proposing, and that QUISP has ranked number 1.
Okay, do I hear a second in that language? Motion, that is.
Ken has his hand up, I'm not sure.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm wondering how, if Richard withdrew his original motion from 15 or 20 minutes ago that we discussed before we go ahead to working on a new motion.
Well, Richard had seconded the motion of the original motion. And so that's why I was asking if you wanted to restate the motion.
And yes, I did vocally withdraw that motion, but it might have been stepped on by somebody else, but I did attempt to withdraw it.
Oh, you did? Okay, I'm sorry. I must not have been aware of that. Okay. So
I will
go
second
ahead,
this
Rich.
motion.
You will second this motion? Okay. I hear a second from Richard on the motion to approve Town of Jericho Stormwater Project based upon the quiz scoring model and WISC review and feedback. Okay. Any further comments? All right, hearing none. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right. All opposed, say nay. Okay. Any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, the ayes have it. Approval to move forward with the assessment of Jericho project, stormwater project.
I just
Ken,
wanna
you have a,
confirm- Oh, sorry, I just want to confirm that Sarah had abstained from the vote, right? 'Cause I heard hearing none, but I did see one hand. Okay. Thank you.
I don't know if that was an abstention, Ken?
No, it wasn't, just procedurally.
Yeah.
Rather than having all the discussion a motion should be made and seconded and then have discussion. So we kind of did that in reverse, but procedurally, you should have a motion on the floor and a second and then discuss it.
Okay. I'll try to do that from here on out. Brad?
Yeah, so typically, like if we were in a select board situation here in a virtual environment, there would be a roll call of the vote. So it's very clear, but it's up to you whether, I know you have the spreadsheet, so I'm assuming all the people on that spreadsheet are present.
Yeah, so Brad, early on in the formation, we decided that that was good enough for us and that we didn't have to do the roll call in the verbal sense. It was just the ayes. And then, we listened for the nays and we had the list. So yeah,
Fair
but early on, we decided to forego that, but thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, then. Are we moving on to the other projects or do we have any more questions? And
I'm happy to jump ahead if we are ready to do that. It seems like an opportune time to give people a look at what I was referring to earlier when I said we are creating a way for people to see the application materials as they come in. What we're trying to get fully operational is a dashboard that would essentially, when the deadline for an application round is complete or the deadline has arrived and the applications are closed, we would have a way for people to see what is being applied for. And so this is like the prototype of that. It happens to be for both basins. We might separate the two, but because of this platform that we're using, this is bootstrapped a little bit, but it illustrates what can happen. So by bays, there's a map that's populated if people provide the location of the project. And then the answers. Now, again, this is a little bit of a sanitized version, but the answers that people provide to the application questions are going to show up in a table and you can see the columns. Now, again, this is to illustrate, it's not exactly, but for each application, you can see there are a bunch of attachments and then you'll be able to look at the attachments and so on. So I just wanted people to know that this is a way that we are hoping to make the information in the applications available. And what would happen in time, well, so if I can just step back, application information and then information about the total of the application. So the total number, what's the funding requested, and some information about the different categories, and then some what we think are important metrics. So these charts show in different forms, this pie is what our, I don't want to call it a quota, but our target of phosphorus reduction is, and how much of that target do the applications address. So out of our pie, the applications that we've received, and this is the Missisquoi. So let me move over to Lamoille.
Dean, can I interrupt for a second? Are you thinking do you have something in front of you you think we're supposed to be looking at? I'm having a few questions come up.
Apologize. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Emily brought that up and I was wondering the same.
Okay. My bad. So yes. You gotta give me a holler sooner than that. So this is what I was talking about. This is the dashboard. So when people fill out their applications, one of the reasons we are doing things the way that we're doing them is we want to handle the data as few times as possible. Information can be used to populate a map, to go into tables where people can see the information about each application. They can see the attachments that people the maps, the budgets, and so on. But importantly, the data that people enter can be used, the funding amount requested, and what I was mentioning before, for each of the basins, you can see we have the one ID assessment application, the amount that's requested, what the scores were, and so on. What I was speaking about when I got was pointed out that I wasn't showing you anything. This pie is the annual phosphorus reduction target. And so the amount of that target that the projects that you are looking at today represents of the total is 35%. So out of the annual total, if we were, one way of looking at it is if we were getting 35% of the phosphorus reduction, we should be thinking about spending 35% of the money. That's just, a rough way. Anyway, this is just a tool that we're hoping to develop further, but it would be a way for us to be as transparent as possible about the applications that come in, and people could, look over the shoulder of every applicant who's producing this. And then lastly, there would be the scoring calculator itself would be something that people can look at, because as the numbers are included in the application, they would pour into the prioritization so that you would know what those are. Apologies for not sharing that when I thought I was sharing that. Just felt like it would be a good touch point for people to know that this is what's coming and will be available in future rounds. I think Aaron's hand is up.
Yes, thanks, Dean. This looks really great. I just had one question that's actually on the last page of the packet you sent us about, and I saw it on the smart sheet, start-up allowance, and it was 8, I believe. And what is that number?
Okay. So am I still sharing?
You are.
Okay. So there's a number that I would describe as kind of like the training wheels number for our target. So that the annual target that we have is the roughly 40 kilograms for this basin. DEC has recognized that it's going to be tough for all of the basins, any of the basins, to hit those numbers right from the get-go. So the reason I included the startup target is that's the while we're still using training wheels number, it's a number that they have suggested would be the basis for their telling us, are you making reasonable progress? Because one of the things that DEC will do regularly is evaluate the work of the WISPs. And it's just basically understood that we're not, if we don't get to 40 kilograms in our first round, it's not the end of the world. What we have is essentially a floor number for assessment purposes. However, it doesn't change the total that we have. The annual number is basically a multi-year number that's divided up into annuals. And just because we are getting a little bit of forgiveness at the start doesn't mean that we won't be required to catch up later. But I wanted people to have both numbers. So in a sense, we are doing better than the floor amount in this first round. So that's a positive sign, but that's what that number is.
Okay, just we have about 20 minutes left, so I think it'd be important to move on to these other projects and come to some conclusions.
Richard had his hand up.
In light of the past discussion, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a motion, but I'm doing this to get ahead of it so we have a motion and hopefully a second, and then we can have discussion. And I'm going to do it as a single project to resolve the issue if it's a slate or a single project. So the motion I want to make is we approve the Quest ranking and analysis of project 11361 and support the funding of that project.
I second that motion. This is Erin DeVries.
Okay, so I've heard a motion from Dick to approve the project ID 11361. And I heard a second from Aaron DeVries on the same motion. Do we have any more comments or discussion in regards to this? Dick, was your hand up for that reason?
Yeah. So looking on page 16, that first project has a kilogram per $10,000 cost of, well, it's not the cost, it's an inverse of cost of 1.14. Now, I think we've just gone over two different things. The state has this expectation that we will, for about $546,000, get about 40 kilograms, which works out to, in kilograms per 10K, about 0.727. So this project is well above that target. The other target we had was one that we just talked about on page 17 of 8 kilograms per $546,000, which is a 0.146. So this project is well above the expectations, both at a first startup time and a overall for the year. So that's why I support this project.
Jed?
Yeah, can we go back to the description of the project?
Yes, just one sec, sorry. Are people seeing it now?
Okay. Yes, yes. So I had a question first about what streams are involved in this woody addition. That was the first question. I mean, my questions are more, process questions, not is this a good project or not? So it's just for clarity.
Right. And I think, I'll answer some of that myself, as it's a project that we submitted. And I think there is one person from the engineering group that's working here on this meeting, but I'll try to be simple. But there's numerous streams in this project and numerous mileage in that area. Let's see if I have more detail. So there's collectively about 14 miles of first, second, and third order streams. And many of these streams have been incised through erosion over time and lack the wood that would naturally exist within them prior to European settlement of the region, and extensive clearing of the forest. So in an effort to improve floodplain connectivity, retain sediment, and to reduce incision and erosion and improve water quality, we suggest strategic large wood additions throughout the streams on the property. And it just so happens to also have a very high phosphorus reduction. So it sort of meets all the criteria, including co-benefits. And it's something I was actually pretty happy and surprised to see. In fact, when the group Red Start was doing the phosphorus calculation, these calculations were based upon some other modeling and not necessarily DEC's modeling, which when they inputted into the DEC modeling, it was something more like to the effect of 26 kilograms or something per acre, which they thought was sort of extreme and sort of not correct. So just sort of give you that sort of background on that. There is, I mean, if it's okay, I think there is someone who is here, James King, who works for Red Start, if you wanted to make any more comments about that, or if that's even something that should happen. I don't know. Dean, is that appropriate? Yeah, I'm assuming it is, but I think I covered the bases there.
And then in terms of the woody additions, how does that restore the floodplain, basically?
So again, I will do my best to answer this question, but if James, you want to Maybe James, you want to make a comment in regards to that since you're the engineer, one of the engineers on this?
Hi, yeah, can everyone hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm with Red Start. I did some of the project design here. And so all these streams highlighted are these are first, second, and a little bit of third order streams in this woodland property. And the restoration practice strategic woody addition. This involves sort of a chop and drop method of using small 2- and 3-person teams to securely put pieces of coarse wood material in the stream channel. And this almost immediately and for a very long period of time, 100 years or more, will start aggrading sediments in the stream. And a lot of phosphorus export from woodlands is due to erosion that passes through streams.
So that aggregate, the increase of the sediment in those areas builds the stream up, the banks, or builds the stream up to the point where the floodplain is at the same point as the stream bed. Is that the idea?
Well, sediments will degrade along the stream bed trapped behind wood. And then during flood events and much phosphorus, a big percentage of phosphorus is exported from forested watersheds in just a very few days of extreme weather throughout the year. And in those events, the structural complexity that the wood additions provide will help sort of dissipate the force of that stream, launch it up onto the banks, connect it better to the banks in those cases. And then you end up with a lot of sediment deposited throughout the forest, where it can be processed much more sustainably and efficiently by that upland forest ecosystem, rather than ending up downstream as a pollutant in Lake Champlain.
Oh,
I can
great, thanks, James.
I can
That
add
was
to that.
very clear.
I can add to that as well. This is Karen Bates. So it's a little more complicated because of our phosphorus calculation, the tool that we have, and that will be very specific to how much new floodplain is created or accessible because of the resulting raising of the stream channel. So the actual phosphorus that can be attributed to this project will be based on subsequent design that we will obtain, showing where the channel might be incised. And so therefore the that there'll be ability for the stream now to access stream or floodplain that it couldn't access before.
Aaron?
Hi.
Hi, okay. This is a really cool project because it's right on the watershed. I think the way I'm looking at the map here, it's right on that watershed divide between the Lamoille and the Winooski. I believe the North Branch is just to the south of this, your red boundary line here. So anyway, I think this is really cool that you're getting into these first, second, third order streams before it lets into the Lamoille or into Elmore Pond. So I wanted to say that, and I did have a question about the total requested cost. I see that, I think on the slide that you showed, Dean, it was total overall cost of 90,000, but I didn't get what the requested cost was, or yeah. Do you have that number?
Yeah, it's only $2,874. It's a minuscule amount.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of preliminary that's already been done, and I think we're just trying to put it together in a way that the DEC likes to see. And so Stacy Pomeroy would be helpful in that area as well. But so the price there would be very high.
Great.
Okay, is there any more discussion in regards to this project? Jed?
Yeah, I just wanted to know, James, what organization James represents?
James represents Red Start Consulting.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we've heard the motions. And we've heard commentary unless there's more. All right, hearing none. I'd like to all in favor of this project, and I can't see the ID in front of me, but all in favor of this project, please say aye.
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 Kent, that's an aye. Okay. And all opposed, say nay. Okay, any abstentions? Okay, hearing none. This project has been approved by the QUISP based upon their scoring model and the feedback and review of the WISC.
And maybe for the record, just noting that you did recuse yourself because we've done
And
that
I
before with-
recuse myself as being one who had put this project in. But being the chair, I wouldn't vote. So yeah. Thank you. Okay, so
we
go
can
ahead.
continue,
Continue
on.
on.
I appreciate that Richard made the motion to keep things moving. I might have teed things up a little bit, but I will do that now, I think, without any harm. This is the slide that people have seen before. What I was going to say before, but I'm going to say now, is that the QUISP's position regarding this slate is that there's clearly one application and you've already approved it. That is an easy one to approve. I won't say anything more. The other three applications are a cluster when it comes to the scoring, although we do rank them 2, 3, 4. And the things that the QUISP wanted to say include that we're sensitive to the kind of on the surface low performance of these projects, but we're distinguishing between design projects and implementation projects, and the QUISP is prepared to give some greater flexibility in terms of performance to design projects than projects where the numbers are pretty fixed and they're ready to go to implementation. So to put it another way, of those three projects, even though the amount of phosphorus reduction of all of them is relatively low, projects for Fairfax and Hyde Park, the Church Street, because they're designed, we're going to hold off on any kind of signaling that we think that these are not cost effective enough. So we are really not hesitating to recommend their approval. The challenge for us is the project for implementation and the Georgia project, where it's harder to do that. So if we were to suggest how these might be handled, it might be that someone would consider, if people don't find the cost effectiveness too low for the two design projects, perhaps deal with those next and save the implementation project for further discussion. And one other thing I wanted to show is that highlighting a point that Richard was making, I've added a column to this the scoring spreadsheet. Yes, the first project, it's $8,700 compared to the $14,000. If you apply that math on the others, the numbers get far less favorable. So I'll stop talking and then see if there are questions.
Richard.
So, yeah, when I looked at this original on the slide, page 16, I was unsure why the ranking was made the way it was. So, because it looked like the last project had a better cost, kilogram savings than the other two. But I think what you just said was that because it's a preliminary design as opposed to a final design or an implementation, it's just doesn't have, it's a further out project. Is that why the ranking ended up lower?
The ranking ended up lower for a couple of reasons. It's because of that. I remember earlier I said that I put the placeholder cost for maintenance. That maintenance cost has what I think now is an outsized impact on the final scoring. So that's one of the factors. A relatively high score on the tactical basin plan, I believe, also came into play. So earlier in this meeting, I said they were essentially a cluster, and I think that's still true. But the one of the main reasons why the Georgia project, the implementation project, scored higher was the lower theoretical maintenance costs.
Another question, I don't remember the exact wording, but the projects that we are supposed to be reviewing and suggesting are ones that don't have other regulatory requirements that they'd be implemented? And does that mean none of these projects have regulatory requirements that they be implemented? I'm not saying the words right, but do you know what I'm driving at?
Yes, and I believe that is the case. Yes, the Fairfax and Hyde Park are not MS4 communities, therefore they aren't required to address these kinds of problems as part of MS4 or those types of regulations.
Or 3 acre.
Or 3 acre.
They will need, they may need permits. Just
Right,
because of natural resources impacts, but.
Right, which is right. So there are two aspects of permits. One is it something that someone would need to do because of regulatory scheme that says, hey, you need to fix these problems. And then there's the development permit, like, oh, if you're proposing to do something, you need to get a permit for it. And these are the latter, not the former.
So we are getting close here, and I've been reminded of that, and I have been noticing the clock too. So I guess based upon what Dean, you said, and if everyone agrees in terms of voting, I actually don't even know what to say. We would like to move on to a potential vote, but I want to kind of understand how we are doing it. Are we doing it as a packet, or are we doing it as one at a time here? What would be your request, Dean?
Well, I said earlier that I think that the design projects could conceivably be dealt with as a single motion. The QUIS position is that we want to try to find a way to fund these, and we feel like it's within our tolerance to fund these design projects, and we would be working with the applicants on the need for trying to maximize phosphorus so that by the time they are done the design, that if they come in seeking funds for implementation, that they will stand a better chance of having good performance.
I agree that the feedback from this model is going to be helpful for any engineers and grant holders to understand what they're really targeting and to do their best to reduce and have better cost efficiency. I agree with that. And I think this is going to help us move forward in the future. But based upon what you just said, do I hear a motion to approve the one preliminary design and one full design projects moving forward?
So moved.
Who said that? Brad?
Brad
I hear
Holden.
Okay, Brad Holden. I hear one motion to approve moving forward with the two designs. So that would be 9536 and 11358 final design, preliminary design. Do I hear a second? I hear a second from Richard Goff. Okay, any further commentary? Jed?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand, it says total cost here of a final design and a preliminary design. But what is the amount that's being asked? I'm not sure I understand that.
So
I can
the
answer
amount-
that.
Oh, yeah, it's on one of the tables, but I'll tell people the cost of the Fairfax project for this phase is 75,000. And for the, oops, sorry, I gotta find it here. For the Church Street is 23,000, I'm sorry, 21,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further comments or questions? Okay, hearing none, it's all in favor of moving these two design projects forward, say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed, say nay. All right, any abstentions?
Abstaining.
And that was Sarah Fairfax. Note that she's abstains. Okay,
So in light of the time, if there are folks that need to leave, then we should be discussing the possibility of having a special meeting for discussion of the Georgia project submitted by Friends of Northern Lake Champlain. If people have some ability to stay, then perhaps you would want to have a little bit more discussion. Don't know.
well, you know, to be fair to everyone else, I think there's a lot of people saying they need to move on. So I would, you know, I'd share motion to table or to set up a special meeting in regards to the Friends of North Lake Champlain meeting.
And it would be very helpful for that date to be identified. Yeah, now.
Okay.
But along with that, I think we would get as much information about the project itself before the meeting.
Yeah.
I just want to ask, like, it's an implementation project, and so I imagine waiting is not really something that the project manager would want to be doing since the construction season is starting soon. I don't know if we can not wait, just an option.
I would say if we were going to have this meeting, it should be very, very, very soon. Like
Yeah,
in a week,
I was going to
next week.
Yeah, I was going to urge 1 week if that's possible.
I'll make a motion that we meet on March 30th at 9 o'clock to review this project 9041.
March.
I second that motion.
At what time?
9.
Yeah. It just so happens to be another WISC meeting at the time, but I can forego that. So I've heard a first and a second motion on that. Okay, so we will, any comments about that date or time?
No, well, I guess a comment, if Dean could send out like that invitation ASAP, so we can get it on our calendars, and then also any information, as Lauren suggested, about that project to review prior to 9 a.m. next Thursday. That'd be appreciated.
The meeting link that I send out will have a link to an online folder with all of their attachments. But I think, you know, we might be able to get some additional information as well, because I think this project has some characteristics that no other projects have.
Jed, did you still have a question?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay,
Sorry
Ken.
about that.
Thank you. And thank you for giving this more consideration. I really appreciate all the work that Dean has done. This council really, I don't know if we can really appreciate how much we have to go back and forth between DEC as we're developing this process. And this is a very complicated situation, and I'm It's unfortunate it had to be our first implementation project that we're looking at as a council. As you're looking at it and thinking about it, I'd really appreciate it if you could send your questions my way prior to the meeting, and I will try to give as complete information as I can possibly give at that meeting. The Stone environmental engineer that's responsible, I don't know if he's got time in his schedule to do this. So it's really important I get your questions ahead of time so I can consult with him and I can have the best information for you. So that's it. And I'm thinking Dean's got everybody's email address, and you can connect to me at khenderson@friendsofnorthernlakechamplain.org with any questions ahead of time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Brandon?
Hey, I just wanted to add, if either James or maybe Karen has time sometime in the next week to meet with me to discuss, I'd be interested to see and understand how the phosphorus reduction was accounted for that project. Mostly because the Georgia project does also include peak flow mitigation and reduction to erosive potential through the Deer Brook Gully, and the inclusion of strategically placed wood or log jams to also retain sediment and reconnect the floodplain. And if I'm being honest, we were having a really hard time quantifying that. And I suspect that our numbers are actually higher than the 1.13 we're able to actually credit based on the DEC's crediting framework. So if there's any way we can, I guess, project this project in a better light, we would certainly be interested in doing so.
So Stacy Pomeroy would be the one to discuss how the phosphorus crediting might be happening. It's a stream,
Yeah.
right? It's not are you talking about putting the woody debris in the gully or in the stream itself?
In the channel, and I should be clear, it's not actually a stream. It's not a blue line stream. It's probably an intermittent stream, but it's not actually mapped as a stream. We're talking about putting the wood log jams in the gully channel, so between the outfall and the Deer Brook.
Right. So it's very, very important to know whether it is considered a stream or not for phosphorus crediting. It may be Claire, actually. So Claire Madden of CWIP.
Yeah, I've been in touch with both Claire and Stacy, and
They're the ones that, yeah.
Last I spoke with Stacy, she was just saying that it was tough to quantify because for gully restoration projects specifically, the metric is cubic feet of gully restored or cubic feet of material held back rather than a phosphorus reduction. And her approach, or at least the approach that she directed me to take, was to try to stress the co-benefits and, the reduction of erosive potential and the sediment retention that would be happening. Understanding that there is phosphorus concentration associated with that sediment, even if it isn't actually being quantified.
Yeah, so that's what you have to do. Unfortunately, these projects have their boxes, right? And
sure.
This is how so it has to be calculated based on cubic feet of gully restored. So and then so in the phosphorus reductions associated with the woody debris is also something that they're working on, and it may be of interest to know, to compare, to talk to Stacy about whether that phosphorus reduction calculated fits with the phosphorus calculator and what we know, or is it an estimate based on other calculations? But maybe Dean knows, he would be the one to accept the phosphorus reduction number. So.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to bring that up while I had the mic for a minute.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Brendan. And thank you, Karen. So I just wanted to make a point that I wanted to confirm that I recused myself from the vote regarding the design projects. It was brought to my attention that I need to voice that, or at least my design project. So in order to
Did
finish
we-
up this meeting soon, Dean, go
Was
ahead.
there a vote? Was there a vote to confirm
I-
the date?
I think I got interrupted, but I guess the ayes have it on that, and there was one
I don't think
abstention.
we, I don't
Yeah.
think we actually said aye. I don't remember. Maybe
No.
We
we
did.
did.
Yeah.
I
Okay,
sent out a
all
link
right.
anyway.
Yeah. Do you want me to go through it again?
No,
I know
I
we
sent
did.
out a link anyway. Just,
Okay.
I think Daya can infer that there was
Yeah.
support for it.
Okay, so do I, wait, I think I heard a motion for that. Oh, I think I'm at the, are all in favor of having a special meeting next Thursday night for the Fairfax project? Say aye.
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 All right.
Is
All
it at
those-
9
Actually-
o'clock? We're talking about 9 in the morning, correct?
In the morning.
10 in the morning? Okay.
9.
Oh, 9. Okay.
Yeah.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, the ayes have it on that. I guess, should we just move forward to the agenda to adjourn the meeting? Okay, so do I hear a motion to adjourn today's meeting?
I motion to adjourn.
Okay. Second, I heard a second from, I believe, Richard. Okay. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye.
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 All right.
And all opposed,
Thanks,
say nay.
all.
How much time should we schedule for next week's meeting?
Good question. I'd say at least an hour. Dean?
I'm saying, yeah, I think an hour would be.
1 hour? Okay.
All right, thanks, everyone. I'm sorry this went over. I got a meeting coming up too, so we're all kind of strict on time here.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right.